Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the extra mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now your hosts, Jackson Mummy and Megan Saya from Celebration Bar Review.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 309 of the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. I'm Jackson Mummy. I'll be joined in just a few minutes by my co-host, Megan Saya, and we'll be talking about all of the updates in the past week having to do with COVID-19 and the bar exam and the date changes. We had some major bombshell announcements coming out of the District of Columbia, and then the potential of a bombshell coming from California late on Friday night. So we're going to catch you up on all of that information, give you our insights and thoughts about what it might mean, do a little bit of punditry perhaps about what you should be doing to prepare for the upcoming bar exams. If this is your first time on the podcast, we're really glad you found us. You can listen to our podcasts through a number of different services: Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, radio.com, Spotify, and so on. Make sure that you subscribe on those services so that you don't miss out on any extra or special episodes. They're coming fast and furious these days. If you prefer to watch today's episode, you can do that by going to our website at celebrationbarreview.com/309. That's the episode number. Now, whatever way you consume your podcast, we're glad to have you with us. We come to you every week with information about what's going on in the world of the bar exam. And obviously, these are strange and weird times. There's been an awful lot going on. We're going to jump into all of that detail in just a moment. Before we do that, I want to remind you that we have been offering for a couple of months now a brand new training webinar called Now is the Best Time to Take the Bar Exam, Why You Should Ignore the Crowds and the Fear. And I don't think that's ever been more true than it is right now. This webinar is designed to show you a particular strategy to deal with all of the changes around the bar exam, the timing, the dates, who's taking the exam and not taking the exam. And since we started offering the training, we've had thousands of people go through it, and we've gotten 5-star ratings. It's been extremely well received. The training is completely free. It lasts 1 hour. And I think the best part of it, frankly, is that at the end, we do a live Q&A. So whatever has happened up to that very moment, we're going to update you. We'll answer your questions about specific jurisdictions. We'll deal with any thoughts that you've got about this particular strategy and how to implement it in your own study. And I really encourage you to join us for one of those sessions. We're offering the training on Saturdays and on Tuesdays. And all you have to do to register is just click at the bottom of the video podcast or in the show notes for the audio podcast. Or if you'd like more details, you can go to celebrationbarreview.com/now and register from there. And then we'll see you live on this training webinar. Now is the best time to take the bar exam. Look forward to having you join me for that session. All right, I don't want to keep you waiting any longer. Let's jump into our discussion with Megan about what's going on this week in the world of the bar exam. So Megan, why don't you catch us up on what's been happening in the crazy world of bar exam scheduling and new tests?
Yes. So the big news this week was we had the first jurisdiction who took the NCBE up on their October 5th and 6th online exam offer. So Washington, D.C. is going to be doing an online exam. This is in lieu of any in-person exam. So Washington, D.C. is no longer doing an in-person bar exam for the rest of 2020. Instead, they're going to be doing this online exam from the bar examiners on October 5th and 6th. It is open to all, but it is not portable. The score is not going to be treated the way that a UBE score would be treated. It will only allow you to practice and be a member of the DC bar. So if you were, let's say, wanting to take the New York bar and you got closed out of that, as many, many people have been, and you might have thought, oh, that's fine, I'll take it in DC. I'll sit in DC instead and take the UBE that way. You can no longer do that for 2020. If you take this exam, as of right now, it is only good for Washington, D.C. And it's a really important point. It's like we just really want to make that clear to people that if you were already registered for this because you wanted to take a UBE exam and transfer the score somewhere else, you need to not take this exam. You need to let them know and move and find another place to take it.
Yeah, now, and earlier in the week when the announcement was first made, the DC bar examiner said, well, we're not going to refund anybody their money, even though they made the announcement after their deadline. They got a lot of pushback on that, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. So a couple of days later, they changed their mind, and the court made the right call and said they would allow refunds. So initially, they were only going to allow you to transfer that application fee and all the fees that you paid to the February 2021 exam. But people were obviously pretty outraged that they would close their registration time and then within, I believe, 24 hours, come down with this, oh, get surprise, we changed the date and we're doing it online and it's not a portable score. It seemed pretty tricky, pretty unfair. And so thank goodness they did the right thing very quickly and decided to offer refunds. So again, if you are registered for the DC to take the bar in DC and you do not want to practice in DC, you just wanted it as a UBE score, you need to contact them and get a refund. It's going to take a little while to get a refund, unfortunately, but you need to get that process going and you need to figure out if there's another jurisdiction where you can sit and take the UBE in the summer or fall. A lot of places have closed, so you need to get on this quickly. We did a video earlier in the week as soon as the news broke, so hopefully you saw that if that pertained to you. We tried to get the word out really quickly so that nobody would get stuck, unable to move to another jurisdiction.
Yeah, and there's a lot to say about this DC change. We did put together a video earlier in the week. Then following that, I had some communication with the NCBE, and it was fascinating, right? I mean, you saw some of it. So the upshot of the communication with the NCBE was that I said, okay, so what are you going to do to help prepare people for this test that you're going to give in October? You know, what's it going to be like? What's going to be in it? What can you help us with there? And their response, which I thought was, you know, candid to be sure and helpful in that sense, was we don't have any idea. We haven't even started. I mean, what I got out of it is we haven't really started thinking about that test because, and I think this is critical, they have to do the July exam, then they have to do the September 9th exam, then they have to do the September 30th exam. Now, remember, this is an organization that does 2 tests a year. They suddenly have 4 tests to give in a period of, 2 months. And I think they're just overwhelmed. Didn't you get that sense?
Yeah, I think this was really, and I know we talked about this before, this really seemed like it was offered as a sort of to mollify people or jurisdictions who are upset about not having an online option. But it certainly didn't seem like they were certainly not encouraging any jurisdictions, to put it that way, to take them up on this.
Yeah. It sounded like they were actually surprised about DC.
So I think this is the lowest priority. It's not a full-length UBE. It's not a portable score. So this, I would say pretty clearly, is the lowest priority exam that they have coming up. This is just not something that they are going to be devoting a ton of resources to right now. They will do at some point because DC took them up on it, but this is not going to be a priority right now.
Yeah, I think unless another few states or a big state decides to jump on board, I mean, if you think about it, the NCBE has to create 200 MBE questions for every exam. They have to create 6 essays and 2 performance tests. So if you multiply that times 3 for the July and the 2 September tests, that's a lot of questions. I mean, I know people think, oh, you can just dash questions off, but no, you really can't. They take years to develop these multi-state tests. And the MBE, part of the reason that I think it's so problematic for the October date is I just don't think they have extra questions that they've vetted properly. And so that's part of the reason what we got from the national conference this week was it's going to be a shorter test, have the same components, but fewer essays, probably only 1 PT, and probably far fewer multiple choice questions. And then who knows how it gets scored, right? I mean, who knows? The individual jurisdictions have to score it because the national conference has said they're not going to score it. And the reason they're not going to score it on the multi-state side is that they can't, there's no equating you can do because there's no way to equate, let's say, a 100 question or a 75 question multiple choice test that's only given in one jurisdiction against the whole, normal body of tests. So you have all of these problems around this. I don't know if they solved any problem by offering this test or if they just created a whole new set of problems.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I think they're in some ways kind of a worst case scenario here for the bar examiners that DC is the one place that's taking them up on it. If several states end up there, and there could be more that end up taking them up. I think at this point, the bar examiners, that would be positive for them if more states did, because at this point, the poor people who work there are now going to be tasked with writing a whole new test for potentially a handful of students.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about only people who can practice in DC, I cannot imagine how many people are actually going to sit for this test. And so, it's the same amount of work for the examiners, no matter if
Yeah, I could see a test where you've only got a couple hundred people taking it. I mean, and it makes no sense. It makes none. The whole thing is crazy. And I thought it was just really interesting that the national conference in their communications basically said, well, this is our priority of work. And we don't know what's going to happen on this other, and we haven't given it that much thought yet. And, and the subtext of it all was, holy cow, they took us up on it. We didn't see that one coming. So, I think that we have a lot to see here. And as we get closer to the July exam dates in other jurisdictions, I think we're playing this big game of chicken with coronavirus and the bar examiners. And some states are going to blink. They're going to say, yeah, we said we could do it in July, but we really can't. We don't have the locations. We don't have the resources. It's dangerous from a health standpoint, and we're going to back off of it. And once they do that, then where do they go, right?
they might jump to the October 5th and 6th exam.
Yeah, they might. So another part of this is there more that we have to say about the October 5th and 6th? I don't want to cut us short on this part of the conversation. Yeah. One of the things in my, Binky's closet of nightmares that I think about at 3 a.m. is how do these exams get graded and not cause a pileup? Well, actually, those of you that have been to Disney World, when you go on the People Mover, and you take the escalator up, and they have to stop the escalator periodically because it gets jammed up at the top and people start tripping over each other because it's carrying you up to the top of the escalator. Does that analogy make sense?
So I think that the good analogy would be, imagine you're just on a regular escalator.
Okay, fine.
That's one person on each, but then, and it's moving. That escalator keeps moving. Those steps are not stopping. But if the person at the top stops and refuses to move, the people just keep piling because that escalator keeps going. And pretty soon you end up with no one has anywhere to go. So. Okay.
And that's why she's a better writer than I am. So that's what I can see happening in February of 2021, that we get a pileup of results from September 9th, September 30th, October 5th, plus all the regular July results, and all the people that sat out the July exam, and the people that had diploma privilege that want to come back in or being forced back in because their limited practice waivers run out. And suddenly we are bombed with people taking the exam in February. And so I think it's going to require, and here's my advice to all of you, you need to be super vigilant in checking and making sure that you are locked in to take the exam, that you've got a seat in any place that will let you come in. Secondly, you've got to be studying now. It is going to be a crazy, crazy February 21. That's what starts to become clearer to me. What's your take there?
Yeah, 100%. I think that, you look at New York, they could not allow in most of the people who wanted to take the test. And so what's going to happen is all those people are not going to suddenly not want to take, right? If that's you, if you've been studying for you want to be a member of the New York bar and you couldn't take it in New York this time, which is most of our students, then you're not suddenly saying, well, never mind, I'll just move to, Iowa. No, you're like, it's just going to be February, right? So that's going to be the case for most people. And I think we're starting to see there is going to be a snowball effect. There's going to be all the people who fail this September administration or July administration and October administrations, right? And then you're going to add them onto the pile of people who couldn't even get in to this last administration. And the truth is that we don't really have any indications that coronavirus is suddenly going to be not an issue at all in February. So we don't know what that's going to look like, but we're probably not going to be able to pack 6,000 people into a hall in February, right? So you have got to keep studying and take the test. If you have an opportunity to take an exam that would work for your travel, what's safe for you health-wise, what will allow you to practice in the jurisdiction that you need to practice in, I think you need to take that test. Just take it, because we just have no idea the ripple effects of this. This is not a one time and then once we hit 2021, no problems anymore. The effects of what's happening to the bar right now are going to continue out for a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, let's use California as an example. There's typically 7,000 to 9,000 bar takers in July. There'll be fewer than that this year. But given the pass rate in California, which has been less than 25%, that means there will be 5,000, 6,000 people who fail the exam. Add those 5,000 or 6,000, and that exam now is going to be given September 9th and 10th. It typically takes the Cal bar examiners on a July bar exam until the middle of November to release results. And you were telling me that the Cal bar has said we're going to get results out from the September 9th and 10th test before the end of the year, which I think means the week between Christmas and New Year's, but you're more optimistic. In any event, that will mean a whopping 7 weeks from that date until the expected February date. Does that mean that we'll then have later March dates for the bar exam? You heard it here first. It could happen. It could be that we will be looking at an ongoing sequence of multiple test dates in jurisdictions until and unless, in my mind, the national conference figures out how to give an online exam. The online exam is the only way around coronavirus limitations, and the national conference just can't seem to get their arms and their logistics around the security issues with an online test. And of course, we'll see what happens. The first test of that will be June 23rd in California for the California first year exam. Then we'll see what happens. And we've already got commitments from Nevada and Michigan and Massachusetts, I think, right? All saying they're going to go online for a test. I don't know about Massachusetts, if they're online or not.
Confirmed yet, but they're possible.
Okay. They're leaning that way. Indiana, I think, was leaning that way as well.
Yeah.
So we're going to find out about online tests. But remember, all of those states that we just talked about have all said, well, if we don't have the multi-state from the national conference, we'll figure out something instead. But you can't do that indefinitely. I mean, at some point, you've got to get back into the MBE. So all of this is to say, to underscore Megan's point, this is not a one and done. This is not going to resolve itself in this sequence of July and September and October tests. And so everybody better just, buckle up for a longer, more protracted, more challenging environment for a period of time. And where you can get into an exam, get into the exam. Stop procrastinating. I know it's scary. I know it's miserable. I know it's all those things. But honestly, folks, if I thought it was going to clear, if I could see the end of the game, right, and say it's going to be clear by X time, I'd say sure. But I can't say that, and I don't think anybody can say that with in good faith right now. So I think you got to take your opportunities where you find them, right?
Yeah, definitely. I would love to move on to talking a little bit about New York too, if we could, because we got a little bit of guidance about what the actual logistics are going to look like. So New York went ahead and sent out emails. They're looking for proctors. And so in their emails about, whether the proctor is going to be doing, they put in a little bit of information. So that was helpful about what's going to happen for the exam room. So they are going to be doing the 6 feet spacing, just like Florida is talking about doing, where all the examinees are 6 feet apart from each other. And really notably, and this is notable, I don't care if you're taking New York or anywhere, New York will be requiring masks for everyone. You should be practicing with a mask on. I know it's uncomfortable. You do not want the first or third time to be the exam day. So even if you are not in Florida or New York, if you are taking an in-person exam, you need to practice with a mask. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, let me talk about that for a minute. I actually tried typing the other day with a mask on, and admittedly, I'm wearing glasses, and they're progressive bifocals. But when the mask comes up like this, it has an impact. I mean, it actually does. And I found it awkward, frankly, to do it. And the thought of wearing that mask for 6 hours or 8 hours is something I would have to get used to. Now, I believe you can get used to it, but right. I think it does not happen, as you said. If the first time you put on the mask for 6 hours is on bar exam day, you are going to be one unhappy person. And I think it could have an impact. The other thing is, I've learned, as we all have, I guess, there are many different kinds of masks of different material with different comfort levels. Some of them are more comfortable across the sides of your face. Some of them are, elastic and they hurt. There's all kinds of things going on here. And I don't know about you, every time I order masks, it takes forever to get them, no matter where I'm ordering them from. And by the way, I still don't have my New Orleans Saints masks, which I'm a little unhappy about. But the point is, you got to be practicing. And I keep talking, particularly to my Florida students this last couple of weeks, and saying, you're studying with masks, and not a single one of them have told me that they are. That is not a good plan. Start studying with a mask. So regardless of where you are, if you're going to be taking an exam in person, I think Megan's right. Get a mask. So New York, they're still trying to figure out locations. I mean, it was an interesting list of places that they said were possibilities, but it also wasn't clear that they were going to do it. And they were recruiting proctors, weren't they? It was like,
right, because they're going to need, all of them are going to need a lot more proctors and workers than in normal circumstances, obviously. And same for the online ones too, because you need the way.
Right. Yeah. You have somebody watching. Yeah.
Right. One person has a small group of people who they're in charge of and watching and monitoring. So yeah, definitely.
Welcome to the new world, right?
All right. And then LaToya asked in the side, so yes, California is considering, they're not sure. This is echoing what we have been talking about and expecting for a while. California has said that if they're going to wait and see how the online examination goes on June 23rd for the baby bar. If it is a disaster, which is kind of what we've been saying, like if this does not work out very well, they're saying that they're potentially going to move the exam to October 5th and 6th. And it's going to be based on the feasibility of upscaling it, right? Because the baby bar is significantly smaller than the full scale bar exam in California. So we don't know what that means yet. Just to clarify, that's the same dates as the proposed test from the NCBE, but California is not a UBE jurisdiction. So California writes its own tests, but then they use the MBE from the NCBE. So potentially, the NCBE has said that jurisdictions can pick and choose. If they want to use parts, they can use parts. So my guess would be that if they do the October 5th and 6th, the reason why they pick those dates are probably not coincidence, that what California could do is they could do their own performance tests and their own essays just like normal. And we don't have any reason to think they would shorten them, but they could do those. And then they would use the shortened MBE online version from the NCBE. So if you remember, we talked last week about with this new one that it might have been a way for the NCBE to get around having to give California its own online version of the MBE because it's very clear that NCBE does not want to do that. So it looks like this might be a way for both California and the NCBE to sort of save face a bit and say, okay, I'll take one step and you take one step and we'll both act like we won in this.
This seemed like a Cold War prisoner exchange to me. Walk them across the bridge. I've binged on the Americans too many times. I think that part of it is a possibility that that California would say, well, let's just scrap our 1 hour essays and our performance tests. We'll use the national conference, but that doesn't seem likely because they have to get them created anyway for the September 9th and 10th date. So I think they would just recycle those, move them into that October 5th and 6th date. And then, as you say, pick up the multi-state or the cut down version of the multi-state, which might be this compromise that saves face for both groups. I think it's worth keeping an eye on that one. As we have been saying for a couple of months, everything depends on California, right? I mean, California rules the roost here. And California's got to wait to see how the first year exam goes. And as we talked about a couple of weeks ago with the rules for the online exam for the baby bar exam, they're horrible. I mean, I hate to even think how many people are going to be disqualified out of that exam. I mean, it's just, and that's what's going to really be the tragedy, is people will have studied and worked, and then their internet blips for 10 seconds and they're disqualified, or the dog walks in the room and they're disqualified, or, 1,000 other things that can DQ you. So I think that it's a perilous route through the summer and fall. And we want to keep a very close eye on California. I know you're out there, you're a member of the Cal Bar, you stay pretty connected to what's going on. So I think, our first clue will come, what's being said in the Cal Bar and what they're trying to do. So yeah. I wish we could tell you all more than that, but I think I don't want to be irresponsible in speculating, but I think that's what we know at this moment. I also wanted to talk a little bit about Florida while we're sort of doing this recap, and then we'll get to the specific questions. Florida has sent out admission tickets to people who are registered. They are now assigning people to either Tampa or Orlando, and then there's some little tiny type at the bottom that says if there's some reason that you want to be at the other location, you can submit a request. Doesn't guarantee you'll get it, but you can say what it is and make the offer. As a Florida resident, as a Florida bar watcher, I still have enormous doubts about how they're going to pull this off. On the other hand, Jacksonville just said they're going to host the Republican National Convention without masks. So maybe it's free for all time and we just do whatever we want to do here, in which case I guess they'll give the bar exam, but it is going to be a challenge. And if you're coming in from out of state, the examiners have said 14-day self-quarantine. You got to have masks. You're going to have your temperature taken. You got to answer a health questionnaire. We know that Florida has always been very difficult about the process of getting into the exam. I think it will be even more so in this exam. So just keep your eye on that. We'll see what happens there. But only those two locations. They're not talking about anything online. They're not talking about changing the dates. None of that is going on. We did have one state that changed their date this week.
Right? So real quick, and then is Rhode Island. They had already said a long time ago that they were postponing. They were not going to be doing the July exam, but they weren't sure when. So they picked a date. They picked September 30th through October 1st. So if you were taking the exam in Rhode Island, then now you've got a date that you know.
And that's a UBE jurisdiction.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, I mean, look, stay tuned. Yeah. We're not done. We're a long way from done, and we'll see what happens. I am waiting. I think the next significant piece of information is, does anybody else pick up the October 5th and 6th date? Barring any decisions there, then I think we wait to see what happens on June 23rd with the California first year exam. And then I think things may start to fall into place a little bit more. So any other thoughts about that before we pivot over?
No, just keep studying no matter which date you end up taking. And no matter, super important, the NCBE, we got it straight from their mouths. Like, this is the same exact scope. Even this shortened exam is same exact scope. California being online, same scope. There's no difference in the scope. So please, please, please do not think, oh, I'm taking a shorter version, so I'm just going to not study, community property in California because it's probably not going to, no, don't do it. Like, Jackson and I were talking about, doing predictions this time through, and really the prediction is there's going to be 4 exams. Everything will be covered. Like in at least one of the exams, they will probably cover every topic. So.
Well, they have to, because you can't ask the person that writes your evidence essays to write 4 essay questions and have them ready to be graded. I mean, people think it's just you write out the question, but listen, there's a lot more to this. You read a draft or point sheet, it is comprehensive. It takes a lot of time and effort, and then you have to be able to train your graders to be able to read that and come up with consistent responses. You just can't do that. You can't do 4 questions in one topic. And I mean, I think it's one of the reasons Texas, for example, cut down the number of questions. They went to a shorter 2-day exam, but you just can't get it all in. And Texas is giving the exam twice. That means they got to do this twice. Right. So I'm pretty sure they're going to take half the questions and put them in one and half in the other. Yeah. So you're going to get them all. I mean, one way or the other, it's going to happen. So yeah, predictions are easier than they've ever been this year. Study everything.
Absolutely everything. All right. We got a few questions kind of coronavirus adjacent. All right. The NC Board of Law Examiners is still holding the July 28th and 29th bar, but just sent an email that states we may defer to the February exam without penalty or additional fees if we choose. part of me is tempted to do that because I feel behind in my studies. With photo reading, I also tell myself I can catch up, but I'm torn.
Okay. Well, I want to start with the basic premise that you and I just talked about. If you've got a seat in an exam, keep it. Take the exam, unless you feel that it would impact your health. And you should never take the bar exam because of your health. So if you're immunocompromised, is that the right word? If you're an old guy like me and you're, I'm not unhealthy, but if you were unhealthy, and you just think going to the exam would jeopardize your health, don't do it. But outside of that, I think you should absolutely take the exam. That's number one. Number two, if you're a photo reader, if you're in our course and you're a photo reader, oh my gosh, please take the exam. You can photo read. You can photo read so fast, so much more effectively. But I'll tell you what photo readers tend to do. They don't trust that they're getting it, so then they grind through it. Just photo read it, flip it. It's there. You got it. It's all there. And I just want to continue to remind you that when I talk to people who are successful and they in our course and we talk about photo reading, they all say, I just gave up and did what you told me to do. I didn't try to fight it or figure it out or analyze. I just did it. And what do you know? It worked. Well, that's the same thing. And I think some of you hold on to photo reading and say, well, I'm going to photo read, but I'm going to photo read slowly. That's an oxymoron. You can't do that. You photo read and you let go. So that's my view. You want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's great. I think it's June 12th. You have time. Like the July, even if you've got the July exam, it's not as close as you think it is. I know it probably feels really close to you, especially when you have maybe people in group coaching calls who are taking it in September and you're like, it's not fair. I want to, it's really, we're not in July yet. And as long as we're not in July, I'm really going to be saying you have plenty of time. But even when we get to July, you have plenty of time. Like, don't take your foot off the gas, but you should not be panicking right now, certainly about, I don't have enough time to get to
Yeah, and you don't have to be a photo reader to have enough time for July. I mean, I want to just express that, but photo readers have an extra benefit, sure.
All right.
All right, we will be back to you again next Friday, the 19th. Hope everybody has a good weekend. Stay healthy and safe. Keep working. We appreciate all of you being here. We appreciate and we will see all of you again next Friday, unless something breaks in the next, between now and then, in which case we'll be back with, breaking news. So take care, everybody. Thanks, Megan. Great to see you again. And we'll see you all again next week. Bye-bye, everybody. Well, Megan, we're back. We managed to get an entire webinar in, and no sooner had we hung up from the webinar than we had this interesting letter from the California clerk of the Supreme Court. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you want to summarize it for our listeners?
Yeah, so basically we talked about it a little bit on the webinar, but the California court has said that they are now considering moving the exam date yet again. They've originally postponed it to September 9th and 10th, and now they are looking at switching it to October 5th through 6th. And the reason for this being that the NCBE has released, or says they will release, a fourth exam on October 5th and 6th that will be an online exam. It will be a shortened version of the UBE exam. And they have said that they will allow jurisdictions to pick and choose and use parts of it as necessary. So what it sounds like, the court said that the MBE is an essential component to scoring the entire two-day exam, which Jackson, you've talked about at length, the reality of that situation. So it sounds like perhaps what California is considering is moving their online exam to October 5th and 6th to allow them to use the MBE portion of the online exam. We would not expect them to use the essays or the performance tests, but they could use if they wanted, they could use just the shortened MBE from that exam so that they didn't have to try and write their own.
Yeah, so let's try and unpack this a little bit. I think that the first point to make is that it looks to me like California is going to be online one way or the other in this next set of exams, right?
Yeah, they left themselves a little wiggle room saying they will continue to explore other options, but this really sounds like the possibility of moving from online September 9th and 10th to online October 5th and 6th with the additional bonus of the NCBE giving them their blessing to use multiple choice questions in an online format.
Right. And I think that then leads to the second piece of the unpacking, which is what do you do about the multiple choice part of the exam? As I see it right now, if California went ahead on September 9th and 10th, the national conference has clearly not budged up to this point in offering a full-length 200-question MBE that could be delivered online. I think it's becoming clearer and clearer that just is not going to happen for whatever reasons. So then California is faced with a problem. How do they give a test on September 9th and 10th without any multiple choice questions? And what do they do with that? And that doesn't seem like it's a workable scenario given the size of the Cal Bar and the difficulty in scoring that already exists behind that exam. So then if I'm trying to reverse engineer this and think like the California Bar and the California Court, I guess I would say, well, the next best alternative for us is to go to the online October 5th and 6th exam. We'll add our essays and performance tests that we would have used in September, and then we'll have something from the national conference that resembles multiple choice, even though it's not the full MBE. Does that sound right to you up to that point?
Yeah, that really seems like to be their reasoning here. We talked about it in the webinar that I think in some ways it's a bit of a both sides sort of taking one step towards one another so that neither one feels like they got totally, destroyed in this negotiation. The NCBE making the concession of fine, you can use the shortened version of the multiple choice questions, but we're not going to give you what you want, which is to allow you to use all 200 during the September 9th and 10th online, and California still getting some multiple choice questions to use on an online exam that came from the MBE rather than having to scrap it or try and write their own altogether.
Yeah, and boy, it's kind of like, kissing your sister, because the reality is now how do you score those questions? We talked about that on the webinar. If you've got 100 questions, how do you score that? And California then would have to score it against their own metrics. There would not be a national scoring, we don't think. We don't think the national conference is going to do that because they've already announced October 5th and 6th is every jurisdiction for themselves in terms of scoring. And while California would obviously score their own essays and performance tests, as they always do, the multi-state component, instead of being scored by the national conference against the national norms, now becomes just what they've got in California. And I don't know what that means. I think it makes the test it certainly makes it less reliable. Does it make it easier to pass or harder to pass? No way to tell at this point. I mean, just absolutely no way to get a feeling for this. But it is a significant change that has come out. And it's really interesting. DC went first and said, we're all in on the October 5th and 6th. Now California opens the door, surprisingly to me, to say, okay, since you don't want to do a full-length MBE in September online, how about this? And so does this open the door now for Maryland, for Massachusetts, or any of the other states that we're going to do online tests to suddenly jump into the October 5th and 6th pool? California's the big player here. And if they want to go October 5th and 6th, that may move us all to October 5th and 6th in terms of the states that want to do online exams. So I think this is a significant statement, but to be clear, when we want everybody to understand this, California has not decided anything at this moment, right?
Yeah, sort of strangely, I think they're saying we want to wait and see what happens with the baby bar on June 23rd. But the odd thing with that, we anticipated that California would not be making a decision until after they saw how the baby bar online administration went. But really what's odd to me is that what they're saying is, well, we'll figure out if we're going to do an online test or another online test after we see how the online test goes. That waiting would make sense if you were trying to evaluate, do we do it in person or do we do it online? I suppose maybe, as you said, putting yourself in the shoes of the Cal Bar examiners, maybe what they're, and the court is maybe what they're trying to think is, if the June exam is just an unmitigated disaster, there's always the possibility of them just scrapping all of the 2020 exams and saying we just can't do any online. I just don't know. I think the only reason to wait until after you've seen how it goes is really that you're anticipating you need an out in case it just is terrible and you think there's no way, as they talk about scalability in their letter, if there's just no way to scale it to the level that you would need for the full length bar exam.
And if California didn't give an exam again in 2020, that means we could be looking at 14,000 people trying to take a bar exam at the beginning of 2021. I can't even imagine the logistics behind that and how that would happen. And it starts to.
They want to give it. They really want to give it.
Yeah. So, good on them that they want to give it. Whether or not this is going to work, I just don't know. I understand the bar in California must feel they're between a rock and a hard place here. And you can see them trying to scramble around and come up with something. But boy, none of these are good solutions, really. And so I think that and I know the question we're going to be getting, we've already started to get it in just the few minutes since we finished our webinar, is what do I do as a student? The answer is you keep studying. You keep working, you keep going, you keep assuming for the moment, September 9th and 10th. You assume an online exam because we don't know for sure one way or the other, but you assume an online exam and you assume one that's got all of the components, the essays, the performance test, and the MBE. Even if the exam switches to October, just to reemphasize, it's all the same subject matter that's being tested. We don't know the scope. We don't know anything else. I think it's safe to assume essays and performance tests would be identical from September 9th to October 5th. They only have to do it once, same set of materials. It's that second day that's going to be more variable, I think, at this moment. So that's what we know, right? Keep people informed. This is certainly, I didn't expect we were going to get back together within a few minutes after finishing, but here we are. So we'll append this. Any other thoughts about this as we sort of wrap this part up?
I think it's important to state again that we do know that if California uses this shortened version of the MBE, it still covers the same scope of material. It's just a smaller number of questions. The NCBE does not even know themselves yet what that number is for sure. So we can't tell you that obviously yet, but we do know straight from the straight from the national conference that it will encompass the same scope of material as the full-scale MBE. So if you're a California student and you're concerned about, am I taking the MBE, am I taking a short version of it, it will have the same exact scope, and you should be studying as of right now as though you are taking the MBE in all the subjects that are encompassed by that.
Yeah. So. And just to say the obvious, not that it was before, but that test in October would not be a portable score. Now, California is not a portable score normally anyway because they don't have reciprocity with other jurisdictions. But just to be clear, you can't jump in, take the online California exam on October 5th and 6th and have it be useful for you anywhere else. So, if it happens that way, that's when the test is given. So just, so everybody knows what the game is there. So, okay, so there's one other item that we need to be thinking about right now, which is if the exam is given in October 5th and 6th, has to be graded by California. What does that do in terms of the dates for getting results out and then the impact in 2021?
Right. So initially the court had said that they would get the grading done by the end of 2020, even if it was the September exam. If they push the exam back a month, I cannot fathom a situation where they're going to be able to get the grading done on the same time frame. California notoriously takes a very long time to grade. They obviously have so many thousands of applicants that they have to read through, and there are 2 performance tests and the essays, and it's a lot to get through. So I don't know what happens, because if we're not looking at grading being done then until maybe late January, mid-January, if they're really, 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 really pushing it, that really does not give you time before the February exam. So I am just not sure. I think it really goes into what we were talking about on the webinar with the ripple effects. If California can't get their grading done until later in January, that pushes all the people who failed, which is about 75% of the people who take the exam in California. They will get pushed, potentially a good number of them will skip the February exam and get pushed into the July. So now we're talking about seeing effects all the way into July of 2021. Even if coronavirus is no longer an issue by then, the effects of this will be felt, for a year from now. That's more than a year from now. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you're pushing the exam back by more than a month, the examiners had said that they expected to get results out by the end of 2020 for a September 9th exam. This would push them to the end of January of 2021. There's no way then that anyone could take the February 2021 exam. So I think you're absolutely right. So I think there's a huge ripple effect here. And this is just going to be one of the factors that has to be considered. All right. Well, thank you, Megan. I appreciate this update. I'm really hopeful that we can put this to bed for the weekend now and wait till Monday morning to see what new and exciting things the bar examiners have in store for us.
Definitely. Thanks. Good to talk with you.
All right. Bye-bye. Well, that's our episode for this week. I hope that the information is helpful to you. I'd like to remind you that if you'd like a continually updated set of data about what's going on in the bar exam in July 2020, you can go to our website and you will see a menu item that says July 2020 exam changes. Just click on that. We've prepared a table with all 50 states, their exam dates, links to their orders and announcements, and any relevant details. So make sure you check that out. And then finally, I want to remind you again about our free training webinar. Now is the best time to take the bar exam. You can register by going to celebrationbarreview.com/now or click on the registration button in the show notes of today's podcast. All right, well, hope everybody stays safe and healthy. We'll see you next week along the Extra Mile.
Thanks for listening and watching the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at celebrationbarreview.com.